In the previous lecture, we added the ability with our UI text field to have our users enter in their own pieces of text or information within the app. So we're going to display some information in now. So I'm going to write a load of jibber jabber in. And then when you finish, you can press our done button. And it displays that information that we added in within our text field into our label, which is great. We can then customize what we're displaying within the app with our users' own information. So now we're going to move on to changing the actual text properties of the text that we're displaying. We're going to add in a numerous amounts of buttons, 6 in total. And what each of these buttons are going to do is change a specific attribute to the text. So we're going to be changing the text color, so we can change what it's looking like, maybe the size and the font, even setting a text shadow to it and the alignment of the text itself. So we're going to jump straight into our main .storyboard, where we're now going to add in these buttons. Okay, so we're going to add them in. We're going to need 6 in total. So just simply copy and paste. So we got 3 there altogether. If I can snap that onto that one. There we go there. Now let's push that one out to the side a bit more. Snaps on. And then we've got 6 altogether. Okay. So I'll center these to the screen there. And each one of these, is going to change a different attribute. So we can learn how we can take the information that we're displaying and how we can change it, whether if we're creating a settings system within the app, or just simply changing how it displays for a user. So our first button is going to change the color. So I'll rename this one color. Our second button, and what this is going to do is simply change the font and the size. So I'll simply name this font size. And I'll make the text a little bit smaller from within it. So put that to custom. So we can just clearly see what it's saying there. And then our third one, this is going to set a nice little shadow. So we're going to add like a visual customization to the text itself. So I'll call this one shadow. Our 3 buttons at the bottom are going to change how the text aligns within the label. So this one's going to align it to the left. This one, let's say this one's going to center it. And again, I'll make this one text a little bit smaller so we can fit them all in. There we go. And then finally, this one's going to align it to the right. So it's 6 simple and basic kind of functions on how we can change the attributes of the information that's being displayed within our application. All that's left to do is add an action to each of these buttons so we can change how it kind of functions within the app. So I'm going to make this over a little bit more so we can clearly see all our buttons. And what we can do is space out this whole action section at the bottom here so we can add them in pretty simple. So our first one, we control click or right click and drag it over. Now this is going to change the color of the label itself. So I simply call this set color, and again making sure the connection is an action. Connect that in. Then we have our font size. So again, action. Set font and the size. Connect that up. This one's going to add a nice styling option such as a drop shadow. So this is set drop shadow. And again, make sure that is an action. Connect that up. This is the first of our kind of center attributes, or kind of the alignment attributes. So this one is set left, action, set center. And then finally, our last one of these 6 is set right. There we go, all done there. Now, before we go on to add the code to them, we're going to close the assistant editor. Now, all the attributes of what we're going to be changing can be changed and preset within our interface builder here. So if I simply copy and paste this label, so we got a third one in the view altogether. Now what I'm going to show you is from within it, we have our color button here, which can, by default, we can change how it looks. So we could change it to display blue or even red. We got the font size one here. Again, we can change the font size from custom system here to custom. And I have a numerous amount of options here. So Helvetica here, we can change it to thin, let's say, and it changes how it displays. Now these are all configurations that we can preset, again, when the application first loads up, and it's all presetly done. So you're asking, why are we adding buttons to it? Well, the simple fact is, at any point in your application, you may want to change how the content's being displayed. For example, if your user has trouble reading the vast amount of text that you may have, if you're creating like a kind of book application, you could give them a setting to increase or decrease the font size so they can see it. Or at any given point, you might be having like playing a game or just doing something in the application. You want your users to have like a nice animated screen effect. You want to give your text drop shadows or even change the color depending on the mood that they're having or at a certain point within the application. And again, if you're populating your app with information live to the user, you may need to align the text to the left or the right or even center. So you can call upon these actions at any given point when you're developing your application, or you can just preset them within the interface builder. Either way, we're going to be covering both aspects. So next is shadow. We got it over here, shadow. We can give it a color. So let's go black. You can see it just gives that little drop shadow there, and we can set the offset of it. There we go. The only thing we can't really do to the shadow is kind of define how much it kind of spaces out. So when we come to code it, we are given an option that we can make the drop shadow a lot bigger. So I'm going to keep that as it is there. And then finally we've got the alignments, which is the simple center, left, and right. So we're going to be kind of recreating all the options that we can have within our attributes inspector, but with all the buttons. So we're going to jump into our view controller.swift, and now we're going to start with our set color. So then, setting the color of our label, and we're going to be working with our second label for this, is again very simple. It's just like how we would set text from within it. So we get our label 2 because we've been working with this second one, and what we're going to do is this time edit not the text attribute but the text color attribute, and that's going to equal to a specific color. And how we do this is bring up our UI colors. So we do UI color dot and then the color that we want. For example, I could do red, so we place in red color with the 2 brackets at the end. So when we trigger our button, it will make that second label display red. So let's build and run and test it out to see exactly how it looks and simply works. So within our button here, I can press it and it changes our label 2, the one with the outlet on it, to red. And again, I can change that up from being the red color. Let's go the blue color this time. And build and run. And we'll see exactly how this looks. So we press the button. There we go. And it changes it to blue. So we can change it within the application. We can trigger it to be changed. So maybe your user's playing a game and they go into let's say they go into a dark dungeon themed part of the game, and you need to invert all the text from your application from black to white to compensate for the dark background you got. This is a simple way on how you can trigger it. So now we're going to move on to the font size and the font being displayed and the size of the font it is showing. So again, we get our label 2, and this time we need to select the dot font attribute of the label and equal that to this time a UI font, just like we've done with our UI color. There we go. And then we simply need to do our bracket, and within it we do name and then a string, 2 quotation marks, and the name of the font we want to select. So I'm going to keep it nice and simple. I'm going to choose Verdana as our font, and then the size. We're going to go a little bit bigger than what it is now. Let's say 35. That's a reasonable size for the font. So this is going to perform 2 tasks at once. It's getting our label, selecting the font attribute, and then equaling that font attribute to Verdana, which is a different font that it's currently displaying. And as well as doing that, it's also going to increase the size to 35. So if you go to build and run this time, you'll notice the 2 kind of actions be triggered at the same time. So we select the remote, and again we change the color, go over to our font size, and again adjust that, and you can see it just simply changed the font itself. It's very similar font to what we already got set as the system, but it has actually changed it. You can see it's a different kind of A and a B and an E to what's being currently displayed there, and it changed the font size altogether, which is a bit smaller than I expected it to be anyway. So now we're going to move on to our shadow, which is, you can't really see that being displayed with the button of full text there, so that's fine anyway. So to adjust the font or the kind of drop shadow on the label itself takes a numerous amount of pieces of code. So we first have to set the color of the shadow itself, and to do that we do label 2 again, and we're selecting this time the layer. We're selecting the layer of the label itself, and then once you've got the layer, we're then going to change the shadow color of the attribute. And then that's going to equal, just like how we set our text color, and that's going to equal our UI color and dot. And let's go for our black color because we have a nice black shadow on it. And then we finish that up with our, this time, CG color, because we editing the layer of the label itself. We're not simply editing the text. So we've set the color of our shadow. We now need to set the offset of it to where it displays. So this time we get our label, dot layer again, then we do dot shadow offset. And that's going to equal to our CG size make, which is just there. And then we give it 2 floats. So if I do 0, 0 in the height and width, this means the shadow will be centered. Then if I choose to go 2, that means it will move it 2 points or 2 kind of pixels to the right. If I did -2, it will move it to the left. So think as 0 as the kind of center point. So let's go with 2, 2. We'll see how that looks for now. So it'll move it to the right and down below. So we've now got the shadow. We now placed it where we want to place it, basically where we want the shadow to start. We now need to kind of select how big it's going to spread. So how big the shadow kind of casts off our label's text. Now this is the attribute that we couldn't edit within the interface builder, in the attributes inspector. So again we do label 2, dot layer, we do shadow, radius at the bottom, and that's going to equal, again let's go for 2, let's keep it all with the same numbers there. You can adjust them however much you want, depending on how much you want it to display. And then we need to display or change how kind of strong it displays on the screen. So we're going to set the opacity. So label 2, this time we do dot layer again, dot shadow opacity. Now you don't want it completely 100%, so we could do 1. That means it will be in its full glory, really dark. We're going to set it off a little bit, as shadows normally are not as kind of dark as the subject itself. So we're going to set it to 1/4 of its original opacity, so that's 25%. So it's going to be a nice grey faded effect within the label's text. So if you go to build and run, and you can see exactly how the shadow comes about. So to our shadow, which is not really being fully displayed within our button, we press it, and you can see it now kind of gives us that nice shadow effect within the label. It's not too much, it doesn't stand out a lot. As you can see, we added a shadow on the label within the attributes inspector. It's just enough to notice it's there, but enough not to make it look a bit weird or kind of horrible. But it gives it enough to kind of make that label stand out to you on the screen. It looks like it's jumping out a little bit, like kind of like a 3D effect. So there we go, we've added in our shadow. And next we're going to work with our 3 buttons at the bottom to change how the text aligns. So let's do all these 3 together. So I'll space that down below there so I can simply center these up. So how we do this, again, is just like all the other ways we're doing it. We get our label 2. And then we do dot and select the text alignment attribute and equal that to our NS text alignment. And as this is our left one, we do dot left. So when we select our button, it will align all the text within the label to the left of the object. We'll simply copy it to save a little bit of time here and paste it in. And this is our center. So this time we do dot center and then finally our right one, which is dot right. So all 3 of those can be worked at the same time, and we can display or change how the text displays within the second label. So at the bottom, by default, we've got it centered, and we can press left, moves our text to the left, center, right. Now if we change, let's say add a shadow and even the color, you see that it's blue with our drop shadow, it all moves with it. So that's the great thing about it. It's all dynamic and does exactly what we set it to do. So there we go. That's a simple way on how we can change the properties of not only text, but you can add these to objects or different objects within your application. But it's how we can adjust the attributes of the objects and how it displays within our applications. Not only having it preset within the interface builder, but how we can do it dynamically within the application just by calling on the different pieces of code that we've now set. The one thing we touched upon within this lecture was adding our own little different fonts. Now you're limited to the fonts you can add in for Xcode. We have our own system fonts that we can add in, such as like the Arial, the Helvetica, the Verdana, and stuff like that. But what happens if you have your own type of font that you want to use? And this means, like for example, like if you downloaded one off the internet, how can we use a custom font within our application? Which is in the next lecture, we're going to talk about how we can get custom fonts, use them within applications, and basically customize our app with its own unique look.